Good afternoon and thank you for joining us for this breaking news update. We are following a developing situation in Issy-les-Moulineaux, a suburb of Paris, where a knife-wielding man has taken several employees hostage in his father's restaurant. Authorities have confirmed there are no customers or members of the public among the hostages. Police have established a security perimeter and dispatched a mediator to the scene. While the intervention is ongoing, the French police have urged the public to stay away and allow emergency services to do their work. A hostage situation is currently underway in a pizzeria where a man is holed up. The elite police unit, the BRI, has been deployed to the scene. Reports indicate that the suspect is the son of the restaurant owner. Authorities have revealed that the man is known to be a drug addict and already has a prior history with the police. We will continue to bring you updates as more information becomes available. And we are now joined by Jihan Godot, a prominent political researcher, to provide a broader perspective on the ongoing situation and its potential implications. Thank you very much for being with us, Jihan. Now, what are your initial thoughts on this incident and its timing?
Everybody. In fact, the situation here in France is quite tightened because this incident took the entire of France by surprise. You know, recently there was a football match taking place between the Israeli team and the French team, and a lot of security measures were tightened because of that. And today, France wakes up to this outrageous incident, and we can't really say for sure that this incident is a terroristic act. Up until now, it's just a criminal act, and the security forces of France stated that this person is armed, and in fact this is a criminal act that France is not really familiar with, and so the situation is quite grave, and France is more than ready to take up all security measures necessary, specifically that it turned out that this person is armed, and in fact the French authorities have a lot of apprehensions that one of the hostages could get harmed by this young man. And so this situation, I would say, is quite grave. And we have a lot of apprehensions that it could add to the security issues that happened because of the football match that took place, as I said previously, between the Israeli team and the French team. But until now, we don't know why this person did any of that.
So it's been a tense time in France at the moment. In this particular case, the suspect is reportedly known to the police and has a history of drug addiction. What does this say about the social support systems in France? Does it say anything about that, do you think, this particular incident?
Until now, the French authorities have not given any verified statements, and the French authorities or police authorities would never give any information before the field investigations are through. If this person turned out to be an armed one, definitely the seizure of unlicensed arms is incriminated by the French law. And so The French authorities right now are still calibrating and investigating into the situation, and they definitely are going to give off all the verified information once they make sure of his identity and the motives that led him to carry out this unlawful act. And right now we're on the brink of, the Christmas celebrations in France. And, in France, there is a multitude of regions in which a lot of tumultuous situations and circumstances are happening. And right now, the forces of gendarmerie of France are now deployed in a lot of districts in France because of these tumultuous situations.
Now, do we know anything about the particular weapon that this individual is purported to be in possession of? And do we also know anything about how the authorities, the police, found out about the hostage situation? Has there been contact?
In fact, up until now, the piece of weaponry, or maybe the piece of weaponry held by this person is not identified. We don't know whether it is a piece of firearms or whether it is a piece of cold steel. But what we know for sure is that this incident took place in an Italian restaurant that is a family restaurant, and this restaurant being a restaurant that is affiliated with Italian cuisine, it could host, different people from different nationalities, but this is just speculation. But up until now, the identity of the hostages is not known, and the piece of weaponry or cold steel held by the person is not identified at the moment.
Now, looking at the pictures on our screens for viewers, we can see the street and we can see the Italian restaurant. This unfolded in a suburban area. Would this be the kind of street that at the moment would be on a normal Saturday, would be bustling with people, and would there be lots of people in the area at this time?
Yes, most definitely. And in fact, today is a weekend in France, and it is only natural for French nationals and different persons to be roaming around the place of the incident. But the police department in France gave off a lot of warnings for civilians to evacuate the perimeter of the incident in order to protect these individuals from falling prey to any kind of assault or potential assault. And as I said, we are on the brink of Christmas celebrations, and now France and the streets and districts of France are replete with foreign tourists or even French nationals. And so the situation at this point is critical, and we are hoping that these incidents are not to be replicated in the future, specifically at this point in time where France is expecting a lot of celebrations, and France might actually witness some tumultuous security circumstances that the French department in France and the gendarmerie in France always warn of. And that's why they give off a lot of warnings for nationals and tourists not to cram up in a lot of areas in these districts in order for them to stay safe.
We can see the BRI unit on our screens wearing their riot gear, their combat outfits with their black face coverings. They've been deployed to handle the situation. How significant is their role in ensuring a peaceful resolution in these kind of circumstances?
In fact, the French police might establish direct correspondence with the person that has taken these individuals hostage, or maybe they try to directly contact him. They'll try to directly contact him in order to identify his goals and his motives and why he has taken these individuals hostage. Because France, of course, gives priority to the release of these hostages that are kept inside of the restaurant. And so there is a possibility of 20% or 30% that there could be direct contact between French police and this person. And in fact, if these peaceful negotiations didn't end fruitfully, the French authorities might resort to just breaking into the restaurant to release the hostages, but of course on the or some kind of casualty could take place if that happened.
And of course, France has had quite a few political problems in the previous months. Macron himself has had difficulties, and the debate in France is quite polarized. How might an incident like this, or broadening out a little bit the football match that you're talking about against the Israeli team, how might this kind of incident and the tensions influence political debates that are going on in France surrounding public safety and criminal justice reform?
Most definitely, the French political tumultuous circumstances right now are quite severe. First, because of the position of France in the Middle East, and on the inside of France, there are discords between the right wing and the left wing, and the party to which Macron is affiliated. And in fact, the left-wing parties have notified Macron or warned Macron of holding this football match between Israel and France, and warned of the potential severe repercussions that could result in or could result as a repercussion of the holding of this match. And so over the last 2 days, there has been some tumultuous circumstances in France taking place, and we don't know whether this incident is related to the holding of this match or not. But I will say that these tumultuous political situations happening in France are going to negatively affect the securitization of French nationals and even diaspora communities residing in France, because we know that France is going through a lot of skirmishes internally. There are a lot of tumultuous situations happening inside France. We have been seeing a lot of demonstrations that are walking down the French streets, which are trying to express their objection to the political policies taken up by the French government. And there are a lot of organizations as well that are trying to take to the streets in order to call for an enhancing of public affairs. And all these things are actually destabilizing the entire arena inside of France.
I just want to remind our viewers what we're seeing on our screens right now. This is a situation, a live situation in Paris, where a man purported to have a knife has taken people hostage in an Italian restaurant. It's rumored that the suspected suspect may be the son of the owner of the restaurant, and it's reported that he might have drug related problems, Coming back to you, Jahan Godot, given the suspect's reported drug addiction, could you tell us, give us an idea what drug and mental health facilities and rehabilitation programs are like in France, and are they sufficient?
In fact, of drugs and the consumption of drugs by juveniles specifically, because, and of course by everyone, because you know the consumption of drugs is something that results in a lot of negative repercussions and sometimes in the practice of some crimes. And right now we see this incident being carried out by a drug addict, and maybe the drugs or the drug addiction of a person or his overconsumption of drugs is the main reason behind his act. We know that a drug addict usually is not really aware of his or conscious of his demeanor, and of course the law in France incriminates illegal or illicit drug consumption and trafficking. And in fact, drug addiction is incriminated in the law, specifically if it is practiced by a juvenile, because drug addiction in fact results in a lot of casualties in the practice of a lot of crimes. And once more, there are a lot of institutions that operate as rehab centers for drug addicts in France, and they do their best in order to treat these addicts and in order to protect them and the society, the entire society, from these addictions.
And what is the public's perception of security and law enforcement in France? And could an event like this have an impact on that? And how do you think the French public will view the response of the police to today's incident?
In fact, the French public opinion, when it comes to these crimes, usually the French public opinion gets staggered by these incidents. And at this point, at these times in the weekend and around Christmas, French families usually take their families on excursions and they try to have fun in the streets. But of course, we can see that the French nationals and everybody in France now are having a lot of apprehensions regarding security and the security situation in France. In fact, French nationals always condemn the French public policies of security, and they make the French authorities incur the responsibility of such security tumultuous situations when they occur. And as well, the French nationals accuse the French authorities of being responsible for the grave situations taking place in the Middle East, in the Gaza Strip, and in Lebanon, because we all know that the French nationals hold Lebanon dear on a multitude of levels. And for that matter, the French public opinion, of course, gets staggered and gets negatively affected by these circumstances.
And France has had numerous situations like this, security problems. We had the Bataclan theatre massacre, of course, a few years ago. We had the Charlie Hebdo situation as well. How can the government reassure the public and maintain confidence
In fact, of course, there are a lot of incidents of that kind that happened before, whether in Charlie Hebdo or in the theater. And of course, French nationals didn't forget all these incidents, but ever since these incidents took place, the French authorities have been raising their preparedness. And this reflected on the absence of, mega-scale criminal incidents in France. But what we perceive in France is just individual criminal acts, like the one that happened today, represented by this young man taking hostage 3 to 4 persons. But in my humble opinion, I think that all these individuals or these individual acts are all terroristic, no matter what the criminals do or the kinds of means they use. I believe, in my opinion, that these are all terroristic acts, in fact, because these acts terrorize the general public in the country. And so the French authorities need to have a proactive vision and to lay out projected scenarios that can be operationalized to secure the nationals. As well, the French authorities need to pay attention to the Arab and Islamic diaspora communities in France and to stop accusing them of committing these horrendous acts. They need to start understanding that not everybody who's going to commit a crime is an Arab or a Muslim. And so the French authorities, I believe, need to be more conscious and to not just make these Islamic and Arab communities in France incur the responsibility of any kind of violent act that takes place in France.
Well, thank you very much indeed for giving us your views and also for shedding some light on the community and social problems that France continues to experience. Thank you, Jehan Godot, for joining us on our special coverage. Now we continue to follow the French special forces as they attempt to free multiple hostages being held at a restaurant in the suburbs of Paris in the French town of Issy-les-Moulineaux, located near Paris. The situation unfolded earlier today when the owner's son of the establishment took 4 individuals captive, prompting a swift response from law enforcement as the authorities work to secure the release of the hostages. Details surrounding the motive for the hostage-taking remain unclear. More details are still unfolding.
Well, it's all wrapped up now. All the vans and everything are away, and I don't think anyone's going to come and talk to us, to be honest. So I would quite like to talk because I'm supposed to.
You're watching our special coverage here on Q News of a hostage situation outside of Paris. And to talk some more about this, Eliane Sarkis is a writer and a political analyst. Thank you very much for being with us here on Q News. Could you give us the latest updates on the situation?
اهلا وسهلا بكم يعني اخر التوقع اخر الاخبار بان
In fact, the most recent updates are the following. The hostages have been successfully released, and the French police has apprehended or arrested this person, this young man that has taken these individuals hostage. And right now the French police is doing all it can and is carrying out expanded field investigations in order and is interrogating this person in order to know his motives behind this incident.
Okay, so the hostages have been freed and we're now looking for the motives. It's believed that this individual was known to police. Do we have any more information about that?
The justice record says that this person is known by the police, but he's not known as a terrorist or not registered as somebody who's a terrorist or somebody who has any kind of terrorist affiliation with any terrorist group or organization. But at this point, we still don't know the motives of this person, but the police could project that this incident might actually be terroristic, but we can't still guarantee for sure that this incident was terroristic.
Okay, and could you describe the role of law enforcement and the specialized units involved in this standoff and events like this? And what tactics are used to resolve crises like these?
At this time, the French authorities are, of course, carrying out field investigations, and a lot of interrogation sessions are being carried out by relevant law enforcement authorities. In fact, the French authorities right now are collecting data and information around the incident, around this person and his family, in order to identify his motives for carrying out this unlawful act.
Okay, so we have this situation now, and just to give viewers that update, we believe that the man has been arrested by the authorities, and that those who were taken hostage have now been released. You've been watching coverage from earlier, some pictures from earlier today, of a hostage situation which took place in a small town outside of Paris, and we've been covering that here on Q News. To talk some more about it, joining us is Mayor Nicolas Fursley, a director of the European Asian Centre for Strategic Studies. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, hostage situations often carry psychological and social repercussions. What kind of support would you expect the hostages to be extended in this situation?
I'm delighted to join you today. To make a long story short, it's a very strange event which happened in Paris today. And I think it's a testament to the fact that people, not only journalists or commentators or national security experts, but people are nervous in France because the nation is in a state of malaise, to use a French word. In the end, it turned out to be a minor incident. So to make a long story short, the guy who was arrested apparently is a drug addict, and the four hostages, the four poor chaps who were taken hostages and freed by the French elite police shock troops an hour ago, they are employees of a restaurant, and that restaurant is owned by the hostage takers' own parents. So in the end, the whole story was a small drama, a tempest in a teapot, but it was interesting symbolically for 3 hours. The French media and the international media were fixated on what was happening because that street called Rue Ernest Renan is like a lower middle class street in the western suburb of Paris, like you said. And coincidentally, in that street are many Kurdish, Turkish, Lebanese, and Pakistani restaurants. It turns out that guy, the drug addict, hostage taker, has nothing to do with Turkey, Kurdistan, or Lebanon. But because we didn't know, and the police initially didn't know, people assumed the worst, and they assumed it may be a jihadist attack linked to the Middle Eastern situation. It turned out not to be the case.
Yes, I think you're right. The whole world's media were focused on it, thinking that it might be another terrorist situation in Paris. But if we look at the broader situation, then France's political discourse, the way that Arab communities are treated in France, when you have a situation like this and people don't know what is happening. We now know, of course, but when people don't know what's happening, what does that mean for communities like the Arab communities and the Pakistani and Lebanese communities, which you mentioned?
It's a great question. So what's interesting is what's in people's minds, perception. And the fact that everyone assumed the worst for 2 hours during that hostage situation tells you that people are tense. So I think it goes deeper than Middle Eastern or Muslim immigrant communities, many of whom are suffering some kind of, discrimination against them. Let's not forget that according to the latest opinion polls in France, 40 or 45% of French voters today, if elections were held this week, 45% of French voters would be tempted to vote for the ultra-nationalist far right, which also tells you a lot. So I think all these signals happening at the same time, they're part of a broader malaise. And I think that malaise, that discomfort or pessimism, it goes beyond, Lebanese, Kurdish, Pakistani migrants. I think it touches the whole French population because French has entered an era of economic, social, and cultural decline. And I think now the people are realizing that their country is declining for many reasons, and they look for scapegoats, sadly. So I think, it's a reflection of the broader tension, cultural tension, and social pessimism at work within French culture and society.
Well, we just have a couple of minutes left. You mentioned the far right and the polarization in France. Marine Le Pen, of course, someone who is doing better. She seems to have softened her offer to the public and tried to make herself look slightly more appealing. Could we see a situation in France where the far right become the most powerful political force?
The short answer is yes. And the short answer, it may happen within the next 11 months, because according to the French Constitution, for the next 10, 11 months, it's complicated to have elections. But let's say by May, let's say by September of 2025, we could have parliamentary elections in France, and the far right could have a big majority in the French parliament for many reasons. It's not necessarily because the far right is super smart and well organized. They're not. So they're not your kind of, smart populist, the kind of populism we see in countries like, for example, Italy or Hungary or even the US. They're not riding a big cultural wave. On the contrary, the far right in France is quite clumsy and disorganized. And their leaders, if you look at the CVs, at the resumes of their leaders, they're very unimpressive. Many of them are high school dropouts, etc. So it's not that much that the far right in France is brilliant. Then the other side, the French centrist, center-right, center-left political parties and leaders, chief amongst them Emmanuel Macron, have had such a lousy track record in the past 4 or 5 years that the French voters are almost like saying, okay, we've tried everything, center-left, centrist, center-right. Macron was a disaster. The only thing we have left maybe is the far right. It's that kind of vote.
Well, thank you very much, Mehan. Nicolas Fursley, the Director of European Asian Centre for Strategic Studies. Thank you very much for your insights on our program today, our special coverage. The hostages were released after investigators convinced the subjects during a dialogue to end the situation peacefully. A good end to the situation in France. And that brings us to the end of our special coverage. Thanks for watching.